Hello there, my name is Glaze de França and this is Parkinson's 2. Today I'm here with Shelly, and Shelly is going to talk with us a little bit about physiotherapy for Parkinson's disease patients. Hello, Shelly.
Hi everyone. Thanks for having me.
Thank you so much for being here. We really appreciate you and all the work that you do for
Thank you.
our patients. And I just gonna start with a little bit of trying to get to know a little bit about you and a little bit about what you do for our patients. Can you take us through the education and support services provided by BC's Parkinson's Society?
Yeah, sure. So there is a whole variety. So it sort of depends on what kind of supports you're looking for. But we have a range of services. For example, we have a information and referral line where people can call in or email with questions in relation to their Parkinson's disease, and we can answer them from there or give them other organizations to refer to. And we also have various printed resources like books, leaflets. We've got online resources as well, like help sheets on various symptoms. And we also have lots of programs. So educational webinars, we have online exercise classes, activity classes as well, such as like drumming, singing, gardening clubs and things like that. We have support groups. We have a clinical counseling program, a virtual physiotherapy program, which is relatively new, and then also a healthcare navigation program. So there's a whole lot of resources out there for people with Parkinson's, and not just for them, but for their family and friends as well.
Wow. Yeah. And you can find all that online.
Yes, you can find all that online on parkinson.bc.ca. Or if the person doesn't have internet or they're not sure where to locate these information, they can always give us a call or drop us an email and we can always direct them to the right place.
That's so great.
Yeah.
Can you tell us what resources are available specifically for caregivers?
Sure, yeah. So we do have a caregiving section on our website where you go to the resource section. There's sort of a list of help sheets. So there is a caregiving section there, and it's got a variety of resources there. So we have, for example, a caregiver booklet. It's pretty comprehensive. It's like a caregiver guide. It's in printed form. We do have caregiver support groups as well, so specifically for care partners who may want to meet with other care partners either online or in person to talk about their journeys with caring for someone with Parkinson's as well. So there are a lot of resources for caregivers as well, and if anybody has questions, they're always welcome to reach out and we can always direct them to the right place.
Great. So can you tell us what drove you to get to the path of physiotherapy on the neuro side of things?
Sure, yeah. So growing up, I was actually a competitive dancer. I did a lot of ballet and needless to say, a lot of injuries. And so I saw quite a few physiotherapists myself growing up, and I always thought, oh, this is kind of a cool profession. You get to work in exercise, which is something that I've always loved. And then as I got a bit older, 18, when I was 18, I actually quit competitive dancing because it just got to the point where it was really tough on your body when you're doing competitive ballet. Like I was literally dancing 7 days a week, not having a lot of breaks, and it was very tough, and I kind of wanted something different. And so at the time I actually didn't know what I wanted to do. So then I went to school to do a bachelor's in neuroscience, sort of like a psychology and science mix, just to see what it was like, because I remember really enjoying neuro in high school when I did like AP Neuro and Psych. I really liked that. So I tried it, and then I thought maybe that's what I wanted to do, but then I realized the course I was doing, the bachelor's degree that I was doing, was on a path specific to research, which I did like, but I didn't think it was something that I wanted to do forever, because I'm someone who's quite active and I don't like sitting down. I don't like being by myself. I like talking to people and meeting new people. And so I kind of took that and thought about physiotherapy as a career. And so I kind of followed that at the time, and it all kind of came together at the right place at the right time, because I also wanted to, one of my bucket list items was actually to live abroad for a bit and travel while I was young. And so I actually did my physio school in London, in England. So that was kind of my opportunity to travel as well. So I kind of fell into that. And then following graduation, I did residency in all the different areas to see what I really liked. And then eventually I kind of settled in neuro, and I applied for my band 6 over there, which is my neuro specialty. And yeah, became a specialist neurophysio over there, and then moved back in 2019. And yeah, that's what I've been doing since.
Nice, nice. What is the role of physiotherapy in the management of Parkinson's disease?
Sure, great question. So we know through research that exercise is a huge, huge part of living well with Parkinson's. Not necessarily just to help with, certain motor symptoms and balance and preventing falls and things like that. But if you do exercise at the right intensity level, at the right frequency, and the right types of exercise, it actually has a role in slowing down Parkinson's. And this is really exciting, and this is really important, because in order to live well with Parkinson's, you sort of need to incorporate exercise and kind of have the mentality of exercising for life. And while for some people that might be maybe easier if there's someone who's always been active and they've always enjoyed exercise. But if we're being totally honest with ourselves, I don't think anybody wakes up in the morning and is going to feel gung-ho about exercising every day. It's very hard if we're being honest, right?
Yeah.
And so with physiotherapy, it's nice to have someone where you can maybe go through the specific problems that you're having with your Parkinson's, and find exercises that can be specifically tailored for those needs, and set a exercise routine, and even just know how to get started with exercising for life. What does that mean? What is the frequency you need to do? What is the intensity you need to do? And all of those sort of individual pieces that kind of help you put together the exercise program that you would do for life. Even though it, of course, evolves over time depending on your interests.
Can you take us through the assessments you do to evaluate the needs of each patient?
Okay, yeah, sure.
Specifically like PD patients.
Sure, yeah. So when I do assessments on a Parkinson's patient, it's very much individualized. So what I mean by that is I'm not going to be doing the same assessment from one person to the other, because it really depends on A, what they identify their issues as, B, what they think their goals are, and maybe C, some things that I'm seeing during our conversation, the way that they're moving as we're talking, or the way that they're walking into the room for the assessment, or just as we go along our session, there might be some things that I notice and think, oh, maybe that's something we want to discuss a bit further, or look into a little more. So usually the assessment starts with a conversation, much like what me and you are doing right now, where we talk a little bit about what the person's main issues may be right now, what they're having problems with, how's their balance, are they falling, those sorts of things that they're kind of experiencing on a day-to-day basis. And then following that, we might talk about some goals that they might have set for themselves, like what do they see from this physio session? Why are they here seeking physio? What do they want out of these sessions? And then it kind of guides us through our assessment depending on the things that we talk about. And then in the physical portion of the assessment after the talking would depend on the stuff that we talked about. So example, if someone says they're falling every day, and we might then dive a little deeper into that. Okay, when you say you're falling every day, what exactly is happening? Is it when you're walking through a doorway? Are you freezing? Is that why you're falling? Are you finding that you're falling whenever you're turning around? Is it in a certain area of the home all the time? Is it certain scenarios? Are you always falling backwards? Or those kind of questions, because the reason one person may have balance problems compared to someone else, as an example, will be very different, right? Not everyone's going to have the same underlying problem that might be causing their falls, using falls as an example. So those would be the kind of things we'd be talking about, diving a little bit deeper into that. And if someone's saying, yes, I'm freezing as I'm going through a doorway or whatever it may be, then we might look at that specifically. Okay, let's have a look at you walking through a doorway just to see what's going on there. Or if they're falling backwards a lot, we might be testing a lot of those step strategies to see if they are able to shift their weight and step in multiple different directions and all sorts of things like that. So it's a pretty vague answer, but it's hard to answer because it really depends on what the person is looking for, and that kind of directs where the assessment would go.
Right. How long usually are those assessments for?
Yeah, great question. So I usually budget for an hour for the assessment, but it depends on the person. So there are instances where I've done an hour with someone, but maybe they need more time, so they might come back on another day for another part of the assessment. This would be especially if someone has maybe some speech problems and it takes a little bit of time for us to discuss certain things. Maybe they have a care partner come in and the care partner also has questions, or if the person is having quite a lot of fatigue, maybe not just physically but cognitively as well, where it's difficult to be mentally engaged for a whole hour or something like that, then it might be split into smaller sessions into more time. But generally I do it in about an hour.
Can you explain some of the techniques and exercises you do with Parkinson's patients?
Okay. Well, it depends on what their deficits are or what their issues are, and we tailor the exercises specifically for that. So, for example, if someone is having balance issues like agility, balance issues, falls, then a lot of the times we would do a lot of weight shifting type exercises, multi-directional stepping exercises, pivoting, turning, lots of things that involves moving your weight from one place to the other and trying to keep your center of gravity on top of your moving base of support, in this case your feet. So it'd be things like that. If it was someone whose main issue may be slowness in movement, so bradykinesia, then we might be doing lots of large amplitude exercises, lots of reaching, twisting, stretching, those kind of big movements that really encourages them to reach to their limits of their range and things like that. If it was someone who is maybe more tremor dominant, so their main issue is tremor, then we might be doing a lot of forced use, high effort type exercises like punching and kicking and those kind of exercises. So it sort of depends on what their issues are, but we would tailor the exercises specifically to those issues. And we often get people who say, oh, I'm having a lot of problem with my posture, and postural type exercises. I tend to incorporate the postural exercises into their exercise program, so that each exercise that they're doing is not going to be just for one thing. It's going to be, targeting multiple different issues that they may be having. But for an example of posture exercise, it would be a lot of strengthening exercises through the upper back, through the lats, through the serratus anterior. It would be a lot of overhead type of movements and things like that. So the exercise prescription very much depends on what the person's issues are and what their goals are, and we kind of tailor the exercises to that.
And would that be different between the ages? Like if a person is a bit older, they will get maybe a different kinds of exercises in compared with somebody that's a bit younger?
Great question. If we're talking about Parkinson specifically, no, I would do the exercises to the intensity level that fits the person regardless of the age, because the whole point of exercise in Parkinson's, if we're specifically talking about slowing down Parkinson's, is that the exercises have got to be intense, they have to be challenging, and they have to be done frequently enough in order to slow down the Parkinson's disease, but also change your brain in terms of neuroplasticity to help you with motor learning and being able to improve on your motor skills. So age is not necessarily a factor when we're talking about trying to prescribe intensive exercise, but it's more the person's fitness level is more relevant. So depending on how active the person was before, you might tailor it to that. But generally, as a rule of thumb, we would say the exercises will need to be sort of at 80% of the person's max effort level, sort of, even though it's very subjective, of course, because it's sort of the person's perceived exertion levels, but we're aiming for about 80% of the max effort levels that they can muster. So age is not necessarily a factor. It's more the person's kind of fitness ability and tailoring the exercise to what they can do now and work towards the goal more than, you know, boxing people into ages. So traditionally, when we talked about physiotherapy for Parkinson's, when I say traditionally, I mean this is like many years ago now, but when you think about the types of things you learn about exercise for Parkinson's in physio school or just many, many years ago, the school of thinking at the time was, oh, Parkinson's is, you know, neurodegenerative, so there's nothing you can do but maintenance. You can only maintain someone's ability, and, you know, all the exercise prescription was, okay, they're stiff, so we're stretching, and it was all sort of about passive stretching and just maintaining, versus now, through research, we know that that's actually not doing anyone any favors by doing, okay, I'm doing a stretching program every day and, you know, I'm just maintaining, because now we know actually, even though Parkinson's is a degenerative disease, there is a huge role for neuroplasticity in the sense that the brain can make new connections. You can actually improve on all of the physical abilities that you have, you know, and it's not just about maintenance anymore. It's about improving what you can do, but also trying to slow down the disease at the same time. So we're now getting away from the old school of thinking where we're doing really passive exercises of just stretching. It's what we call neuropassive exercises, where you're doing it for maintenance. Arguably, it probably isn't maintaining much anyway, but yes, you're doing it for maintenance, is neuropassive. And then we kind of got into the neuroactive exercise where, okay, we now know that, you know, exercises can't just be stretching every day and that's it, but now we got to add in an aerobic portion. We now got to do some strength training and challenge people's balance. So that's sort of the neuroactive exercise that we moved from. So we went from neuropassive to neuroactive exercises, where we're now actively trying to make new connections in the brain by challenging people in their exercises. And then through even more research, we're now knowing that we can actually get away from neuroactive exercise and move on to neuroprotective exercise, where it's a step up from the neuroactive exercise in the sense that, you know, not only are we challenging people, but we're trying to do exercise as a way of protecting brain health and bettering brain health and slowing down the disease. So then neuroprotective exercise would be an incorporation of all of these things. So it would be, you know, a aerobic portion, there's a strength training portion, there's a coordination training portion, there's dual tasking portion, there's choreography in the exercise that you're doing. So it's challenging your coordination, your balance, your agility, and all of these things kind of incorporated together. And so now the ideal type of exercise you should be doing is this neuroprotective exercise versus, you know, the neuropassive exercise or even the neuroactive exercise, although as a minimum neuroactive exercise is better than nothing. But so that's sort of how the school of thinking change. Well, we usually do that via outcome measures, which don't have to be necessarily like formal outcome measures that's designed by someone. It could be something as simple as maybe you're tapping your foot on a footstool to you know, for your ability and your weight shifting, and you're setting 20 seconds on the clock and you're counting how many you can do, and you're maybe redoing that again several weeks later to see whether that's changed from your agility type exercises. Or it might be you walking down a hallway, maybe you walk a certain distance, and then at the same time you're saying out loud as many boy names or girl names you can think of from the letter A down to Z, and that dual tasking, you're timing yourself doing that, but counting the amount of steps they're doing during that task, and then you retest it again several weeks later to see, you know, whether their exercise program has been doing what it's intended for. So outcome measure is sort of the way that you would go about reassessing and seeing whether someone's gotten better or not. But of course, if someone develops a new injury or something happens and you need to modify the exercises, that's sort of done on an ongoing basis. So it's not like we give an exercise program and then that's it, see you later, we'll see you in 6 weeks or whatever, but it's sort of an ongoing process. So every time you see them and you're going over exercises or you're progressing or regressing exercises, you're always kind of assessing on the spot and you're seeing what the person is doing and you're changing or modifying your treatment plans based on that. So technically reassessments are ongoing all the time. You're doing all the time whenever you're seeing that person. But if you're looking for like a formal way to see whether someone's improving or not, then outcome measures would be a way to do that.
I see. Usually, do you meet in person or do you guys do like Zoom these days?
Yeah, great question. So through the Parkinson Society, the virtual physiotherapy service is virtual only. Well, as the name implies, it's virtual physiotherapy service. But the reason it's virtual is because PSBC is a provincial organization, and we need to have equitable access to our services. So regardless of where you live in BC, you need to be able to access the service. And so the best way to do that is virtual, because you could be living, in northern BC or on the island or somewhere else that's not the lower mainland and still be able to have the same service there. So luckily for Parkinson's, it's actually relatively easy to do virtual sessions than maybe other types of physiotherapy you might see with other conditions, because Parkinson's is exercise based, so it is relatively easy to do virtual sessions where it's kind of like you watch me and follow along and I can see your movements and those kind of things. But of course, there are some precautions we would need to take, because if you're not physically there with the person, and then, if they're a little wobbly or there's someone you think might is a frequent faller, then you might be needing to get them to have a care partner with them during the session, or you need to do lots of safeguarding things, like you need to find out their emergency contact if there's someone who lives alone, make sure they have like chairs set up or a table set up in a way where they can grab hold of something, or if they were to fall backwards, they would just sit in the chair, and those kind of things. But through PSBC, it's all virtual.
And how long usually those virtual sessions are for?
Yeah, so the initial session, we usually give about an hour, 45 minutes to an hour. It sort of depends on the person and what they're seeking physiotherapy for. And then the follow-up sessions are 45 minutes.
How do you stay up to date with the latest research in PD management?
Yeah, great question. So there's lots of different ways you can stay in touch with the latest research. You can either read research, so subscriptions to servers that have research articles. We also have lots of educational webinars through PSBC, so we're very lucky in that sense, because you can attend the webinars that you host, and they're always held by people who are doing research in the field or experts in the field of Parkinson's. So through that, you can also learn a lot. There's conferences like the Insight to Parkinson's conference through PD Warrior that happens every year, which has really, really great information specific to healthcare professionals. There is the WPC, the World Parkinson's Congress, which is of course coming up. So those are all really educational things that you can kind of seek out. But basically in reality, when you're trying to stay up to date with Parkinson's research, but you're also practicing at the same time, it's really about allocating time throughout your days or weeks or month dedicated specifically to courses or attending these conferences and education webinars and things like that.
Beauty. Can you share any fun stories or like notable outcomes from your work with Parkinson patient or patients?
Yeah, sure. Ooh, notable stories.
Or a fun one.
Yeah. I mean, I think for me, it's very rare that I don't see someone with idiopathic Parkinson's get better if we do an intensive exercise program and they do the program the way it's intended to do. So I don't really have stories where the person hasn't succeeded unless there were other complications, or maybe it was Parkinson's plus or something else.
But I guess really fun story was I did have someone many years ago when I was still working in England, and he had come into our movement disorder clinic, and he wanted physio, he wanted rehab, and the only goal he didn't have any goals. The only goal he had was his daughter was getting married in about 9 months' time, and his only goal was to be able to walk her down the aisle. I know, it was it was very inspirational. So that was his only goal, and at the time he was walking, but his endurance wasn't great, and he had a lot of freezing problems, and especially when he's out in a crowd, his freezing was worse because of just having some anxiety with people watching you, and you know, not wanting people to think you're drunk or you're a strange man walking down the street who's freezing and things like that. So that was the only goal he had, was he wanted to be able to walk a certain distance, and the aisle distance was very short. It wasn't very long. It was maybe like 5-6 meters, something like that. So his goal was to be able to walk 5 to 6 meters without freezing, specific to that aisle, and to be able to without having to use his walker. So that was a very, very amazing goal that he had, because it's so personal. And I think a lot of the times when the person has a very personal goal, not just a goal like, you know, I want to improve my motor abilities, even though that's a great goal as well, but when you have a goal that's so specific and so personal, it actually makes it easier to do that in rehab, because you have something very measurable and very specific. You got a time frame that you can work towards. So with that, we were starting with freezing strategies of, you know, if you did freeze, what could you do? Could you weight shift a little bit to try to increase your movement so your feet aren't stuck on the spot? And also, of course, the more you mimic a freezing episode, the more you actually trigger a freezing episode. So working on a lot of high stepping, length of the stepping, those kind of things, repetitive movements with stepping over things, using like external cues, like, okay, if you did get stuck, the floor is tile, so could you try to think about stepping on the lines of the tile? And then eventually, after doing some of those strategies, we would create an aisle space in the gym, where of course it's not the same, but we would say, okay, so you said it's 5-6 meters, let's measure out 5-6 meters, let's line up some chairs on the side and pretend this is the aisle, and then let's practice walking down the aisle and things like that. So that was what we worked on, and I thought that was a really inspirational story, because it's just so personal, and it's something that this man wanted to do really badly, and it was amazing to work with him on that. It was a privilege to work with him on that.
Wow, that's so beautiful. Well, thank you so much, Shelly.
Of course.
Thank you for having us, and thank you for helping all our PD patients. I'm sure they really appreciate you.
I hope so. I hope they're not like, Shelly is so naggy.
You're fabulous. Thank you.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you. Thank you, guys. See you next time.
Cut. Well done, you guys.